The red-stamped envelope hit the kitchen table like a bomb. My mother's scream cut through the afternoon silence, sharp and raw. I dropped my backpack and ran in to find her clutching a debt collection notice, hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. "Eli," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Eli, what is this?" I grabbed it from her hands. My name blazed across the top in bold black letters. Elias Bennett. Final notice. $14,000 in unpaid loans. Default warnings. Legal action pending. My stomach dropped to the floor. I'd never taken out a loan in my life. I was 19 years old, working part-time at a grocery store, barely making rent. Below my name, a signature I didn't recognize, but the address listed was my Uncle Ray's. My mother's brother. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike. The betrayal hit like ice water in my veins. My name is Eli Bennett, and that was the moment my family imploded. I drove to Uncle Ray's house in a blur of rage and disbelief. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I rehearsed what I'd say, demanding answers, threatening police, but when I knocked on his door and he opened it, smirking like nothing was wrong, every word died in my throat. "Eli, what's up, kid?" He leaned against the doorframe, casual as Sunday morning. I shoved the notice at him. "This. What the hell is this?" He glanced at it, barely reading, then shrugged. "Oh, that. Yeah, I borrowed your name for some paperwork. No big deal." No big deal. My vision blurred with fury. "You forged my signature. You took out loans in my name. That's identity theft, Ray." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, don't be dramatic. I'll pay it back eventually. You're young, your credit will bounce back." He said it like he'd borrowed a cup of sugar. Like my entire financial future wasn't collapsing. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I turned and walked away, shaking. Back home, chaos erupted. My mother was on the phone with my Aunt Kendra, Ray's wife, her voice rising to a shout. "Your husband stole from my son. This isn't something we just forget." Aunt Kendra's voice crackled through the speaker, defensive and sharp. "We need to handle this privately. Calling the police will destroy this family. Think about Ray's kids. Think about your mother." My mother faltered, the fight draining from her face. That's when I understood, they were going to protect him. The rest of the family started calling. My grandmother, my older cousin Tessa, my mom's other brother. Every conversation followed the same script. "Let's keep this between us. Don't make it worse." Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody offered to help fix what Ray had broken. I sat on the couch, numb, realizing I was completely alone in this. The family I'd trusted my whole life had chosen sides. And I wasn't on the winning team. The phone calls started 2 days later. Unknown numbers lighting up my screen at all hours. I answered the first one, hoping it was someone offering help. Instead, a cold voice demanded payment. "Mr. Bennett, you're 60 days overdue on a loan of $6,000. When can we expect payment?" I tried to explain it wasn't me, that it was fraud, but the collector cut me off. "That's between you and law enforcement, sir. Until we receive documentation, you're liable." I hung up, hands shaking. Then came the rejection letters. My credit card application, denied. The lease for a college apartment I'd been planning to move into, rejected due to poor credit history. A background check for a better job, flagged. Every door I tried to open slammed shut in my face. My name, the name I'd carried my whole life, had become a curse. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror that night and barely recognized myself. My future had been stolen, and nobody cared. Sleep became impossible. I spent nights hunched over my laptop, researching identity theft laws, credit disputes, fraud protection. The more I read, the angrier I got. And the more ashamed. How could I have been so stupid? How did I not see this coming? My mother found me at 3 in the morning, eyes bloodshot, surrounded by printed articles and legal forms. She sat beside me, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "This is my fault. I should have known Ray was capable of this." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, baby." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. But part of me blamed her, too. She'd raised me to trust family above everything. To believe blood meant loyalty. Now I was learning the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you most. We sat there in the dark, two people drowning in the wreckage of someone else's greed. A week later, I overheard my mother on the phone with my grandmother. Their voices drifted through the thin apartment walls as I pretended to sleep. "He did this before, didn't he?" my mother said, her tone sharp. Silence. Then my grandmother's weary voice. "To your sister. Years ago. We covered it up. Paid it off quietly. He promised it would never happen again." My blood went cold. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't desperation. Ray was a predator, and our family had been enabling him for years. I sat up in bed, hands clenched into fists. How many others had he hurt? How many debts had been buried to protect his reputation? The next morning, I demanded answers. My mother admitted everything. Ray had stolen from my aunt 10 years ago, destroyed her credit, and the family had quietly fixed it to keep the peace. They'd let him get away with it. And now he'd done it to me. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I confronted Uncle Ray again, this time with a printed timeline of his lies. He met me at a coffee shop, looking annoyed. "Ray, you've done this before. I know about Aunt Patricia. I know the family covered it up." For a second, his smirk faltered. Then he leaned back, eyes cold. "You don't know what you're talking about, kid. Patricia was a different situation. She forgave me. And you will too." I slammed my fist on the table. "I'm not forgiving anything. You committed fraud." He stood, towering over me. "You think you're the victim here? I'm trying to save my business, feed my family. You're just a selfish kid trying to ruin my reputation." People in the cafe turned to stare. Ray lowered his voice, leaning close. "If you keep pushing this, everyone will know you're the problem. Not me." He walked out, leaving me shaking with rage. Within days, I heard the whispers, "Eli's causing trouble. He's overreacting. Ray's going through a hard time, and Eli won't let it go." My uncle had turned the family against me. And it was working. The debt collector's voice was blunt, almost bored. "Mr. Bennett, unless you file a police report proving identity theft, you are legally responsible for this debt. It doesn't matter if it was your uncle, your friend, or a stranger. Your name, your problem." The words hit like a hammer. I'd been hoping for some loophole, some way to fix this without destroying my family. But there wasn't one. It was simple. Either I reported Ray and cleared my name, or I lived with his crimes for the rest of my life. My credit would stay ruined. My opportunities would vanish. My name would be worthless. I thought about my future, college, career, a home, a life. Ray had stolen all of it. And if I stayed silent, he'd get away with it. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I printed the police report forms, filled them out with shaking hands, and signed my name at the bottom. Keeping the peace had cost me everything. It was time to fight back. I walked into the police station on a Tuesday morning, my mother beside me. She'd cried all night but told me firmly, "If this is what you need to do, I'm with you." The officer took my statement, photocopied the fraudulent documents, and opened an official case. The moment he stamped the file, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I'd done it. I'd reported my own uncle. Within hours, the family erupted. My phone exploded with texts. "How could you? You're tearing this family apart. Ray's kids are asking why their dad's in trouble. Are you proud of yourself?" My Aunt Kendra called, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You just destroyed our lives. I hope you're happy." I blocked her number. Then my cousin Tess's. Then my grandmother's. One by one, the people I'd grown up with turned their backs on me. At the next family gathering, my cousin's baby shower, nobody spoke to me. I stood in the corner, invisible, while they laughed and celebrated as if I didn't exist. I left after 20 minutes. Nobody noticed. Ray's counterattack was swift and brutal. He told everyone who'd listen that I was lazy, entitled, and looking for someone to blame for my own bad choices. The kid's always been irresponsible, he said at a family barbecue I wasn't invited to. Now he's trying to make me the villain. Cousins I'd grown up with started posting vague messages on social media. Crazy how people turn on family for no reason. Some people will do anything to avoid taking responsibility. My friends started asking awkward questions. Is it true your uncle helped you out and you reported him to the cops? Why would you do that to family? I tried to explain, but the lies had spread too far. Ray was charismatic, well-liked, the fun uncle who told jokes and bought drinks. I was just the quiet kid who caused drama. Isolation crushed me. I stopped going out. Stopped answering calls. Stopped trying to defend myself. What was the point? Nobody wanted the truth. They wanted the easier story. And Ray had given them one. One night, I checked my credit score on a financial app. The number that appeared made my stomach turn. 512. I stared at it, numb. A year ago, I'd been at 720. Now I was barely above the worst possible rating. I couldn't get a loan. Couldn't rent an apartment. Couldn't even finance a used car. Ray had destroyed me, and even with a police report filed, the damage would take years to undo. I sat on my bed, head in my hands, and broke down. I cried for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Deep, wrenching sobs that left me gasping. I'd done everything right. I'd worked hard, stayed out of trouble, trusted the people who were supposed to love me. And I'd been punished for it. The system had failed me. My family had failed me. I felt like giving up. What was the point of fighting when nobody believed you? When the person who hurt you faced no consequences? I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. A coworker named Xavier noticed I'd been off. We were stocking shelves one afternoon when he asked, "You okay, man? You've been quiet." I almost brushed him off, but something in his tone made me pause. I told him everything, the debt, the betrayal, the family turning against me. Xavier listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. My brother went through something similar. Identity theft by an ex-girlfriend. Destroyed his credit. He pulled out his phone. There's a lawyer in town, Simone Caldwell. She specializes in consumer rights and fraud cases. Took my brother's case pro bono because she'd been through it herself. He texted me her contact information. She's tough. And she hates people who steal identities. I stared at the text message, feeling the first flicker of hope I'd felt in weeks. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe there was still a way to win. That night, I called Simone. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and confident. "Tell me everything." I did. And for the first time, someone believed me. Simone told me to gather every piece of evidence I could find, emails, texts, bank statements, anything that proved Ray had access to my information. I spent days digging through old messages, screenshots, family photos. Then I found it, a picture from a family barbecue 2 years ago. Ray was standing beside a brand new truck, grinning, beer in hand. The caption my cousin had posted read, "Uncle Ray bought a truck in cash. Living the dream." I cross-referenced the date with the loan documents. The truck loan, $6,000, had been taken out in my name the same week as that barbecue. My hands shook as I sent the photo to Simone. She replied immediately, "This is gold. We can prove he benefited directly from the fraud." We found more. A text thread where Ray asked my mother for my social security number, for insurance paperwork. Receipts showing purchases made with credit cards opened in my name. A trail of lies and theft stretching back months. Ray had been sloppy, overconfident. He never thought I'd fight back. That was his mistake. Simone filed formal fraud paperwork with the court, naming Ray as the perpetrator. A process server showed up at the next family barbecue, 4th of July, my grandmother's house, and handed Ray the legal documents in front of everyone. The backyard went silent. Ray's face turned white, then red. He looked at the papers, then at me standing across the yard. "You did this," he said, his voice shaking with rage. I met his eyes and didn't flinch. "You did this to yourself." Aunt Kendra started screaming. My grandmother stood up, looking between us like she was watching a car crash. My mother stepped beside me, hand on my shoulder. "He's doing what you forced him to do, Ray," she said quietly. "You brought this on yourself." For the first time, someone in the family publicly stood with me. The shock rippled through the crowd. Some relatives left immediately. Others whispered furiously. Ray crumpled the papers and threw them at my feet. "You're dead to me," he spat. I picked up the papers, smoothed them out, and walked away. The war was no longer quiet. It was in the open. And I was ready to finish it. The fallout was nuclear. Aunt Kendra cornered my mother at the grocery store, screaming in the parking lot. "Your son is a traitor. He's ruining our lives." People stopped and stared as she unraveled. "Ray made a mistake, and now you're letting Eli destroy him." My mother, usually quiet and conflict avoidant, stood her ground. "Ray didn't make a mistake. He committed a crime. Against my son." Kendra stormed off, shouting curses. The video someone recorded went viral in our small town. At the next family gathering, my cousin's graduation party, everything exploded. Ray confronted me in the driveway. "You're going to regret this, kid." My grandmother appeared, frail but fierce. She looked at Ray, her own son, and said something I'll never forget. "You did this to yourself, Raymond. You've been doing this for years. And we let you. But not anymore." She turned to me. "He deserves what's coming." Ray's face crumpled. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The family's protection was gone. He was finally facing consequences. The court date arrived like a storm. I sat across from Uncle Ray in a small claims courtroom, my lawyer beside me. Ray had hired his own attorney, a slick-looking guy who kept smirking at us. The judge called the case. Simone presented the evidence, the forged signatures, the truck photo, the text messages, the timeline. Ray's lawyer argued that it was a family misunderstanding, and that I'd given him permission. Simone slid a document across the table, a handwriting analysis comparing Ray's signature to the forged one on the loan applications. They didn't match mine. But they perfectly matched Ray's handwriting. The judge examined it, looked up at Ray, and said flatly, "This is clear fraud, Mr. Bennett." Ray's face drained of color. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge ruled in my favor. The debt was voided, my credit would be cleared, and Ray was ordered to pay restitution. As we left the courthouse, Ray stood on the steps, staring at me with pure hatred. But I didn't care. I'd won. Legally, at least. Emotionally, I was still in pieces. Winning felt hollow. The debt was gone, my name was legally cleared, but the damage to my family was permanent. My phone stayed silent. Invitations stopped coming. Holidays were lonely. At Thanksgiving, I ate dinner with my mother in our small apartment while the rest of the family gathered at my grandmother's house without us. I scrolled through social media, seeing photos of smiling relatives, the same people who'd called me a traitor. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. My mother cried into her mashed potatoes. "I'm sorry you lost your family because of me," I said quietly. She looked up, eyes red. "You didn't lose anything worth keeping, baby. And you gained something more important, your integrity." I nodded, but the ache remained. Justice and loneliness made bitter companions. A week later, I made a decision. I was leaving. Moving to another city, starting fresh where nobody knew my name or my story. I packed my life into boxes, said goodbye to the few friends I had left, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. I moved to Portland, 3 states away. Found a tiny studio apartment, got a job at a bookstore, and enrolled in night classes at a community college. Every day felt like climbing a mountain. My credit was slowly recovering, but the emotional scars ran deep. I avoided talking about my family. When coworkers asked about my background, I gave vague answers and changed the subject. I was rebuilding, one small piece at a time. I took a personal finance class and became obsessed with understanding credit, fraud protection, and identity theft. I started a blog documenting my recovery, not for attention, but because writing helped me process the pain. Slowly, people started reading it. Messages came in from strangers who'd experienced similar betrayals. "Thank you for sharing this. I thought I was alone. Your story gave me the courage to report my own family member. I realized my pain had purpose. What Ray had done to me could help others. And that gave me something I'd lost, hope." A year passed. Then 2. I never heard from Uncle Ray. No apology, no acknowledgement, nothing. He simply pretended I didn't exist. For a long time, I waited for closure, some admission of guilt, some sign that he understood what he'd done. But it never came. Simone warned me early on, most criminals in family fraud cases never apologize. They convince themselves they're the victim. She was right. Through mutual friends, I heard Ray told people I'd overreacted, that I'd ruined his life over nothing, that he was the real victim. He'd rewritten history in his mind, casting himself as the wronged party. I stopped waiting for an apology. Closure, I learned, doesn't come from other people. It comes from accepting that some people will never change, never admit fault, never feel remorse. Ray would live the rest of his life believing he'd done nothing wrong. And I had to be okay with that. So I let go. Not forgiveness, I'd never forgive him, but release. I stopped carrying his guilt. It was his to bear, not mine. My blog grew. What started as a personal journal became a resource for people navigating identity theft and family betrayal. I posted guides on disputing fraudulent debts, protecting your credit, filing police reports, finding legal help. Readers shared their own stories in the comments, creating a community of survivors. One day, someone suggested I turn it into a business, offering consulting services to help young people understand credit and fraud prevention. I laughed at first. Me, a business owner? But the idea stuck. I registered an LLC, created a simple website, and started offering one-on-one coaching sessions. My first client was a 22-year-old woman whose mother had stolen her identity. She cried through the entire first meeting. By the end, she had a plan and hope. That became my mission, giving people what I'd almost lost, a future. Within a year, I had 50 clients. Then, 100. Local news picked up the story. Young entrepreneur turns personal tragedy into thriving business. My face was on the evening news. My name, my real name, the one Ray had tried to destroy, was everywhere. And it meant something good. At my cousin's wedding, 2 years after I'd left town, whispers spread through the reception. I wasn't there, but my mother was. She told me later what happened. People were talking about the news feature. "Did you see Eli on TV? He started some big company helping people with identity theft. He's doing really well." My mother watched Uncle Ray's face across the room. He'd been laughing loudly, dominating conversations as usual. But when someone mentioned my name, he went still. His smile faded. He excused himself and left the reception early. My Aunt Kendra looked devastated, realizing that while they'd shunned me, I'd been building something meaningful. My cousin Tessa, who'd sided with Ray, approached my mother. "Is Eli really doing that well?" she asked quietly. My mother smiled. "Better than well. He's thriving." Tessa looked down. I should have believed him. My mother didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. The tide had turned. The family that exiled me now watched from the outside as I succeeded. And Ray, the man who'd tried to destroy me, was forced to witness it all. Uncle Ray's own lies eventually caught up to him. He'd continued his pattern, taking out loans, forging documents, living beyond his means. But this time, there was no family to cover for him. His credit collapsed. Creditors came after him hard. His business failed. The truck he'd bought with my stolen name got repossessed. Aunt Kendra left him, taking the kids. He moved into a small apartment, alone and broke. I heard about it through my mother, who heard it from my grandmother. Part of me felt vindicated. This was karma, justice served cold. But another part of me just felt sad. Ray had destroyed so many lives, including his own, because he couldn't stop lying. My grandmother called me one night, something she hadn't done in years. "Eli," she said, voice trembling. "I need to tell you something." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She explained how the family had pressured her to stay silent, how she'd been too afraid to stand up to Ray. "You were right all along. And I was a coward. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I whispered, 'Thank you.' It wasn't enough. But it was something." I visited my grandmother a few months later. She looked older, smaller, like the weight of guilt had physically aged her. We sat on her porch, drinking iced tea in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You did what none of us could, Eli. You stood up to him. You refused to let him win." Tears streamed down her face. "I watched him hurt people for years. Patricia, you, others I don't even know about. And I stayed quiet because I was scared of breaking the family apart." She looked at me. "But you were braver than all of us. You chose truth over comfort. And I'm so proud of you." Something inside me broke open, a knot of pain I'd been carrying for years. I hugged her, and we both cried. It wasn't full closure, but it was enough. Enough to let go of some of the anger. Enough to believe that maybe, someday the family could heal. That visit changed something in me. I stopped viewing my family as the enemy. They weren't evil, they were just scared, flawed people who'd made terrible choices. That didn't excuse what they'd done. But it helped me understand. And understanding brought peace. Years passed. My business grew beyond anything I'd imagined. I hired staff, expanded services, started speaking at conferences about fraud prevention. I became someone people listened to, someone whose name carried weight. Not the weight of debt and shame, but the weight of credibility and respect. One afternoon, I stood in a real estate office, signing papers for my first home. It was small, a 2-bedroom house with a backyard, but it was mine. As I signed my name on the final document, I paused. Elias Bennett. The name that had once symbolized betrayal, theft, and ruin. The name that creditors had screamed at me over the phone. The name that had appeared on fraudulent documents and court filings. Now it was on a deed. A business license. News articles. Testimonials from people I'd helped. Ray had tried to destroy my name. Instead, he'd made it unforgettable. I looked up at the real estate agent, who smiled and handed me the keys. "Congratulations, Mr. Bennett. Welcome home." I walked out into the sunlight, keys in hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete freedom. I stood in the backyard of my new house, looking at the empty space where I'd plant a garden. My phone buzzed, a text from a new client thanking me for helping her dispute fraudulent charges her father had made. I smiled and pocketed the phone. My mother arrived an hour later, carrying a housewarming gift, a framed photo of us from when I was 10, smiling at a family picnic. "I thought you'd want this," she said. I hung it in the living room, right beside a framed news clipping about my business. Old and new, side by side. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. My mind drifted to Uncle Ray. I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he ever felt regret. Probably not. People like him rarely do. But I didn't need his apology anymore. I didn't need his acknowledgement. I'd built a life he could never touch. I'd turned his weapon, my name, into my greatest strength. He'd tried to bury me, to erase my future, to make me disappear. Instead, he'd forged me into someone unbreakable. My voice echoed in my mind, steady and sure. He tried to destroy my name. Instead, he made it unforgettable.